Commander Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Valiant, watching the stars drift past through the main viewport. 3 years had passed since humanity discovered faster-than-light travel, and now 17 human colonies spread across nearby star systems. Jake never imagined he would be commanding a ship this far from Earth, but here he was leading the most important mission in human history, the communications. Array crackled to life, and Tony Rodriguez turned from his station with wide eyes. Tony had been monitoring deep space frequencies for months, but today something was different. The signals coming through were not random noise or natural phenomena. They were organized and clearly artificial. Someone or something was trying to talk to them. Dr. Lisa Park rushed to the bridge carrying her portable analysis equipment. Lisa had studied alien life possibilities for decades, but never expected to actually encounter it during her lifetime. Her hands shook as she connected her devices to the ship's computers and began analyzing the incoming transmissions. The patterns were complex but showed definite intelligence behind them. Jake ordered the ship to reduce speed and maintain a safe distance from the signal source. Through the viewport, a massive structure became visible against the backdrop of distant stars. It was unlike anything humans had ever built, with smooth curves and surfaces that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. The alien ship was at least 10 times larger than the Valiant and radiated a soft, blue glow from various points along its hull. The communications came through more clearly now, and Tony worked frantically to establish a connection. The alien voices were musical and seemed to harmonize with each other in ways that human vocal cords could never replicate. Lisa's translation software struggled with the complex sounds but slowly began to piece together meaning from the patterns. A holographic projection appeared in the center of the bridge, showing a tall, graceful being with translucent skin and 4 arms that moved with fluid precision. The creature's face had large dark eyes and features that were both alien and somehow familiar. When it spoke, the translation came through. With only a slight delay, the being introduced itself as Ambassador Veltar of the Zephyrian Collective and explained that they had been watching human expansion with great interest. Veltar spoke of a vast alliance spanning the galaxy with over 800 different species, all working together under Zephyrian guidance. The ambassador's tone was friendly but carried an undertone that made Jake uncomfortable. According to Veltar, the galaxy had been peaceful for thousands of years because young species like humanity were guided and protected by older, wiser civilizations. The collective had perfected this system, and no species had ever been harmed under their care. All that was required was for humanity to accept their guidance and submit to collective oversight for the good of all. Jake felt his stomach tighten as he listened to the ambassador's words. The offer sounded reasonable on the surface, but something about the way Veltar spoke suggested that refusal was not really an option. The commander asked for time to consult with Earth and his crew before making any decisions about humanity's future. The ambassador's expression remained pleasant, but Jake noticed the alien's eyes had grown colder. Veltar explained that all species eventually joined the collective, and that resistance only led to unnecessary suffering. The Zephyrians had perfected methods of bringing reluctant species into the fold, and their success rate was perfect. No species had ever successfully refused membership in the collective. Lisa exchanged worried glances with Tony as they listened to the conversation. The ambassador was speaking about peace and cooperation, but the underlying threat was clear. Jake tried to maintain diplomatic courtesy while explaining that humans valued their independence and would need to discuss this matter thoroughly before making such an important decision. Veltar's forearms gestured. In what might have been disappointment or perhaps irritation, the ambassador informed Jake that the collective was patient but not infinitely so. Humanity would be given 1 solar cycle to make their decision, after which the collective would be forced to act in the best interests of galactic stability. The holographic image flickered and disappeared, leaving the bridge in uncomfortable silence. Jake immediately ordered Tony to establish secure communications with Earth, while Lisa began analyzing all the data they had gathered about the Zephyrian ship. The return journey to human space took 2 weeks, during which the crew worked constantly to prepare their report for the Global Defense Council. Admiral Kate Sullivan listened grimly to Jake's briefing at Defense Headquarters, while Director Paul Chen took detailed notes about the Zephyrian technology and capabilities. The room fell silent when Jake played the recording of Veltar's ultimatum, and the implications began to sink in for everyone present. Admiral Sullivan had spent her entire career preparing for potential conflicts but had always assumed humanity's enemies would be other humans. The idea of facing an alien civilization with thousands of years of experience was terrifying. Director Chen argued for attempting further negotiations while Sullivan began calculating Earth's defensive capabilities against unknown alien technology. The debate continued for days as more information came to light. Intelligence analysts discovered that the Zephyrians had been monitoring human communications for decades, which explained how they had learned human languages so quickly. This revelation changed everything because it meant the aliens had been studying humanity long before making official contact. The Global Defense Council voted narrowly to reject the collective's demands and prepare for whatever consequences might follow. Admiral Sullivan began mobilizing every available ship and weapon system, while diplomatic teams prepared alternative proposals to offer the Zephyrians. Deep down, everyone knew that humanity was about to face its greatest challenge and that their response would determine whether the human species remained free or became another member of someone else's empire. Jake returned to space aboard the Valiant with orders to monitor Zephyrian activity and provide early warning of any hostile actions. As he watched the alien ship growing larger on the view screen, he wondered if humanity was making a terrible mistake or taking the first step toward something greater than anyone could imagine. The Zephyrian response came exactly one solar cycle later, just as Ambassador Veltar had promised. Jake Morrison was patrolling the outer edge of human space when his sensors detected the first signs of the massive fleet approaching Earth. What he saw through the Valiant's telescopes made his blood run cold as hundreds of alien ships materialized from hyperspace in perfect formation. Each Zephyrian vessel was enormous compared to human ships, with the largest ones stretching several kilometers in length. Their hulls gleamed with the same flowing design Jake had seen on Veltar's ship, but these were clearly built for war rather than diplomacy. Strange energy patterns danced across their surfaces and weapon ports opened like blooming flowers along their sides. Admiral Kate Sullivan watched from Earth's orbital defense platform as the alien fleet took positions above every major human world simultaneously. Mars colonies reported Zephyrian ships in their sky, while Europa Station transmitted frantic messages about massive alien vessels blocking out Jupiter's light. The collective had deployed forces to every corner of human space in a single coordinated movement that demonstrated their incredible organizational capabilities. The first demonstration of Zephyrian power targeted Luna Base, where 50,000 humans lived and worked in the moon's underground cities. General Kethvar's voice echoed across all human communication channels as he explained that resistance would only bring suffering to innocent civilians. The collective did not wish to harm humanity but would do whatever was necessary to maintain galactic stability. Jake watched in horror from his position near Proxima Centauri as a single pulse of energy struck Luna Base. The weapon did not explode or burn like human weapons, but instead seemed to erase the target from existence entirely. Where the sprawling lunar complex had stood moments before, there was now only empty space, as if the base had never existed at all. The message was clear and terrifying. The Zephyrians possessed technology that could remove entire populations without leaving any trace behind. Admiral Sullivan received reports from across human space describing similar demonstrations above every colony world. The aliens were showing humanity exactly what would happen if they continued to resist. Director Paul Chen immediately opened emergency communications with the Zephyrian fleet, requesting negotiations to prevent further loss of life. General Kethvar appeared on screens across Earth explaining that the time for discussion had passed. Humanity would surrender completely and accept collective guidance or face the consequences of their stubborn refusal to accept reality. The Zephyrian demands were simple and non-negotiable. All human military forces would be disbanded immediately, and their weapons turned over to collective representatives. Earth's population would be relocated to designated sectors where they could be properly supervised and educated about their role in the galactic community. Human expansion into space would cease and all colonies would be abandoned or placed under direct alien control. Admiral Sullivan knew that accepting these terms meant the end of human independence forever. She activated Operation Defiant Storm and ordered every available ship to converge on strategic positions throughout human space. If humanity was going to be destroyed, then they would at least go down fighting rather than submitting to alien domination. The first battle erupted near Proxima Centauri, where Jake Morrison led a squadron of 12 human fighters against a single Zephyrian destroyer. The human ships opened fire with everything they had, but their weapons seemed to have no effect on the alien vessel's shields. In response, the Zephyrian ship fired once and 11 human fighters simply vanished, leaving only Jake's damaged vessel limping back toward friendly space. Pilot Alex Turner barely escaped when his entire wing was caught in what the Zephyrians called a disruption field. He watched helplessly as 24 of his fellow pilots were phase-shifted out of normal spacetime, leaving no debris or energy signatures behind. Alex's fighter had been just outside the field's range, but he could do nothing to help his friends as they disappeared into nothingness. The pattern repeated across every battle zone as human forces threw themselves against Zephyrian ships with desperate courage but no hope of victory. Admiral Sullivan's carefully planned strategies crumbled against alien technology that seemed to violate every known law of physics. Human weapons could not penetrate Zephyrian shields, while alien weapons could eliminate entire fleets with single shots. Dr. Lisa Park worked frantically at Firebase Alpha, analyzing wreckage from the few human ships that had managed to return from combat. The hidden research facility had become humanity's last hope for finding some weakness in Zephyrian technology. Lisa's team included the best scientists and engineers from across human space, all working together to understand how their enemies' weapons functioned. Engineer Maria Santos studied energy patterns recorded during the battles and noticed something strange about the way Zephyrian weapons affected different targets. Ships that followed predictable flight paths were destroyed instantly, while vessels that changed course randomly seemed to last slightly longer before being eliminated. The difference was small, but it suggested that alien weapons relied on some form of predictive targeting system. Commander Beth Harrison led one of the few successful human operations during this dark period. Her team managed to capture a damaged Zephyrian scout ship that had been separated from the main fleet during a skirmish near the asteroid belt. The alien vessel's crew had been killed when their ship's life support failed, but the technology remained intact for human scientists to examine. The captured ship revealed disturbing information about the collective's true nature. Dr. Park discovered that Zephyrian technology was based on quantum consciousness links that connected every member of their species across vast distances. This shared awareness allowed them to coordinate perfectly, but also meant that individual Zephyrians had very little independent thought or creativity. General Kethvar grew impatient with human resistance and escalated his campaign by targeting civilian populations directly. Agricultural worlds were devastated by weapons that poisoned soil and water, while industrial colonies found their machinery converted into materials for Zephyrian construction projects. Millions of humans died or disappeared as the aliens demonstrated their complete control over human space. Jake Morrison regrouped with the surviving human forces at Firebase Alpha, where Admiral Sullivan was planning humanity's last desperate gambit. With conventional military tactics proving useless against Zephyrian technology, the humans would have to try something completely different. They had nothing left to lose, and perhaps that would finally give them the advantage they needed to survive. 6 months had passed since the Zephyrian invasion began, and humanity was still fighting. General Kethvar could not understand why these creatures continued to resist when victory was mathematically impossible. Every other species in the galaxy had surrendered after losing a few worlds, but humans kept fighting even after losing dozens of colonies and millions of their people. Lieutenant Commander Beth Harrison crouched in the ruins of New Tokyo Colony, watching Zephyrian patrols move through the devastated streets. Her team included demolitions expert Rick Martinez and sniper Jenny Walsh, along with 12 other volunteers who had nothing left to lose. They had been conducting hit-and-run attacks against alien supply convoys for weeks, using tactics that made no sense by conventional military standards. The key to their success was embracing chaos and unpredictability in ways that confused the methodical Zephyrians. While alien forces expected logical strategic movements, Beth's team would attack supply lines they didn't need to cut and defend positions that had no tactical value. The confused alien commanders wasted resources trying to understand human strategy that followed no recognizable pattern. Dr. Lisa Park had been captured during one of these raids and found herself face-to-face with Ambassador Veltar in the command center of a Zephyrian mothership. The alien diplomat studied her with those large, dark eyes, trying to understand what made humans so different from every other species the collective had encountered over thousands of years. Veltar wanted to know why humans persisted in fighting when defeat was certain. According to every mathematical model the collective possessed, their computers had analyzed human behavior patterns and concluded that surrender should have occurred months ago, when it became clear that resistance was futile. Yet humans continued to launch attacks that violated every principle of logical warfare. Lisa looked directly at the ambassador and spoke with quiet determination about what it meant to be human. She explained that they were not fighting because they expected to win, but because surrender meant the death of everything that made them who they were. Humans would rather die free than live as slaves, even if slavery meant safety and comfort under alien protection. The concept seemed to genuinely confuse Veltar, who belonged to a species that had never known individual freedom or independent thought. Zephyrians existed as part of a collective consciousness where personal desires were subordinated to the greater good of their society. The idea of choosing death over submission was literally incomprehensible to minds that had evolved to value survival above all else. Meanwhile, Maria Santos had made a breakthrough in her analysis of captured Zephyrian technology at Firebase. Alpha, the alien weapons and computers, operated using quantum harmonic frequencies that assumed their targets would behave in predictable, rational ways. When faced with chaotic, unpredictable behavior, the systems experienced resonance cascades that caused them to malfunction or shut down completely. Admiral Kate Sullivan immediately saw the implications of this discovery and began restructuring human military doctrine around controlled chaos rather than traditional strategy. Ships would attack in random patterns that made no tactical sense, while ground forces would engage in operations that appeared suicidal but actually created maximum disruption in alien command. Systems Captain Danny Foster volunteered to lead the first test of these new tactics during an assault on a Zephyrian supply depot near the Centauri system. His squadron approached the target using flight paths that changed randomly every few seconds, while maintaining radio chatter about completely unrelated topics. The confused alien defenders could not predict human movements, and their automated weapon systems began targeting empty space. The Kai attack succeeded beyond anyone's expectations as Zephyrian forces found themselves unable to coordinate an effective response to human unpredictability. Foster's ships destroyed the depot and escaped with minimal casualties, while alien reinforcements arrived at the wrong locations because their computers had miscalculated human intentions based on logical assumptions. Commander Sarah Blake coordinated simultaneous attacks across 17 different star systems using the same principles of controlled chaos. Each assault followed completely different tactical approaches, with some forces advancing directly, while others retreated in apparent panic before striking from unexpected directions. The Zephyrians could not develop countermeasures against strategies that changed randomly from moment to moment. General Cathvar became increasingly frustrated as his perfectly organized forces suffered defeat after defeat against enemies that refused to follow any recognizable military doctrine. Zephyrian commanders reported that human attacks seemed designed to maximize confusion rather than achieve specific objectives, which made it impossible to predict or counter their movements. The alien general decided to escalate the conflict by using planet-killing weapons against major human population centers. The agricultural world of New Eden was selected as an example to demonstrate the price of continued resistance. 3 million colonists lived on New Eden, including many families with children who had never known anything but peace. Jake Morrison watched helplessly from orbit as Zephyrian dreadnoughts surrounded New Eden and began charging their most powerful weapons. He tried to intervene with the small fleet under his command, but could not break through the alien blockade in time to prevent what was about to happen. The planet's surface erupted in flames as the atmosphere was stripped away and the crust began to crack. The destruction of New Eden sent shockwaves through human space, but not in the way General Cathvar expected. Instead of breaking human morale, the atrocity-hardened survivors resolved to fight even more desperately against their oppressors. Families who had lost everything in the attack volunteered for suicide missions, while colonies that had remained neutral declared war against the collective. Dr. Park witnessed the change in human behavior from her cell aboard the Zephyrian command ship, The aliens monitoring human communications could not understand why the loss of New Eden had made humans more dangerous rather than more compliant. Their psychological profile suggested that such massive casualties should have convinced humanity to surrender in order to prevent further suffering. Lisa tried to explain to Veltar that humans became stronger when pushed to their limits rather than weaker. The ambassador studied reports showing increased human resistance following each escalation and began to suspect that his species had encountered something completely outside their experience. For the first time in thousands of years, the collective faced enemies who thrived on adversity rather than being crushed by it. The war entered a new phase as humans abandoned all pretense of conventional military behavior and embraced pure chaos as their primary weapon. Admiral Sullivan approved increasingly desperate operations that should have been impossible but somehow succeeded through sheer unpredictability and the willingness of human crews to sacrifice everything for the chance to hurt their enemies. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when humanity stopped trying to win and started trying to make their opponents lose. Admiral Kate Sullivan stood in the war room at Firebase Alpha, surrounded by displays showing the current state of human space. Red markers indicated worlds under Zephyrian control, while blue dots represented the few remaining human strongholds scattered across 17 star systems. The map looked hopeless, but Sullivan had learned that hope was no longer relevant to human survival. Maria Santos had perfected her understanding of quantum resonance disruption and was now teaching crash courses to every human pilot and soldier who could reach the hidden base. The key was embracing complete tactical chaos while maintaining just enough coordination to avoid destroying friendly forces. Human crews learned to ignore their training and follow instincts that made no logical sense but somehow worked against alien technology. Captain Danny Foster led the first large-scale implementation of the new doctrine during an attack on the Zephyrian fleet, protecting the industrial world of Kepler Prime. His combined task force included ships from 12 different human colonies, each using completely different tactical approaches with no overall battle plan, beyond causing maximum confusion among enemy forces. Foster's own squadron approached the alien fleet in a tight formation, before suddenly breaking apart and attacking from random directions while broadcasting false distress signals and contradictory orders. Another group of human ships pretended to retreat in panic while secretly laying mines in patterns that defied military logic, but somehow channeled Zephyrian pursuers into kill zones. Commander Sarah Blake coordinated her forces using a communication system based on ancient human poetry and song lyrics that made perfect sense to human crews, but appeared as meaningless noise to alien intelligence analysts. Zephyrian computers tried desperately to decode what they assumed were sophisticated military codes, while completely missing the simple emotional meanings that humans understood instinctively. The battle raged for 6 hours with human losses mounting steadily, but Zephyrian forces becoming increasingly disorganized as their formation broke down under the strain of trying to counter unpredictable attacks. For the first time since the war began, alien ships began retreating from human forces, as their commanders lost confidence in their ability to predict enemy movements. General Kethvar received reports of the defeat with growing alarm and immediately dispatched reinforcements to restore order in the Kepler system. However, the human forces had already scattered using escape routes that violated every principle of military retreat by moving directly through areas of maximum alien concentration rather than seeking the safety of open space. Dr. Lisa Park observed these developments from her continued captivity aboard the Zephyrian command ship, where Ambassador Veltar was struggling to understand how inferior human technology was achieving tactical victories against superior collective forces. The alien diplomat reviewed battle recordings with increasing frustration as human actions appeared random, but produced coordinated results. Lisa explained that humans possessed something the collective had never encountered in thousands of years of galactic conquest. They could act as individuals while remaining part of a greater whole, without sacrificing their independence to a shared consciousness. This paradox allowed them to be unpredictable at the tactical level, while maintaining strategic coherence through emotional bonds rather than technological links. The revelation disturbed Veltar deeply, because it suggested that the collective's fundamental approach to warfare was flawed when facing opponents who did not behave according to logical principles. Zephyrian success had always depended on their ability to analyze enemy behavior patterns and develop countermeasures, but humans kept changing their behavior faster than alien computers could adapt. Meanwhile, Jake Morrison had been given command of a special operations fleet, tasked with striking deep into Zephyrian-controlled territory, using the most chaotic tactics human imagination could devise. His ships were equipped with captured alien weapons that had been modified by Maria Santos to respond to human operators who deliberately introduced random variables into their targeting systems. The modified Zephyrian weapons began malfunctioning in ways that actually improved their effectiveness when operated by humans who embraced unpredictability. Jake's crews discovered that the more irrationally they behaved, the better their captured alien technology performed as quantum resonance cascades amplified human chaos into devastating weapons effects. Lieutenant Commander Beth Harrison pioneered ground combat techniques based on the same principles during her assault on a Zephyrian command center on the colony world of Titan Base. Her team attacked using tactics that appeared suicidal, but actually exploited weaknesses in alien defensive systems that assumed rational behavior from attacking forces. Rick Martinez created explosive devices that detonated according to random timers, while Jenny Walsh used sniper tactics that targeted locations based on dice rolls rather than tactical importance. The confused Zephyrian defenders could not predict where the next attack would come from, because the humans themselves did not know until the moment they acted. The assault succeeded when Harrison's team deliberately walked into what appeared to be a trap, while broadcasting their intentions clearly on open communication channels. The Zephyrian defenders assumed this was a deception and repositioned their forces to counter the real attack they expected to come from a different direction. Instead, the humans proceeded exactly as they had announced and captured the command center, while alien forces waited in the wrong locations. General Kethvar realized that conventional military doctrine was useless against enemies who had weaponized insanity itself and decided to escalate the conflict using the collective's most powerful strategic weapons. Planet-killing devices were deployed against major human population centers in an attempt to force surrender through overwhelming destruction, rather than tactical defeats. The agri-world of New Eden had been the first target, but now, entire star systems came under attack as Zephyrian dreadnoughts systematically eliminated human colonies. Billions of people died in the space of a few weeks as the aliens demonstrated their absolute technological superiority over human defensive capabilities. Instead of breaking human resistance, the massive casualties produced an unexpected psychological transformation among the survivors. Rather than despair, they felt cold, calculating fury that made them even more dangerous to their enemies. Humans who had lost everything began volunteering for missions with zero survival probability, just for the chance to hurt the collective. Dr. Park noticed the change in human communication patterns as survivors stopped mourning their losses and started planning revenge with methodical precision. The emotional chaos that had made humans unpredictable was crystallizing into something harder and more focused while retaining the essential randomness that disrupted Zephyrian systems. Admiral Sullivan approved Operation Final Storm, which represented the most ambitious military undertaking in human history. Every remaining human ship and soldier would participate in a coordinated assault on Zephyrian command nodes throughout the galaxy with the goal of creating cascade failures in their quantum consciousness network. Success would cripple the collective, but failure would mean the complete extinction of humanity. The plan violated every principle of military strategy by committing all available forces to simultaneous attacks across impossible distances with no reserves or fallback positions. It was exactly the kind of chaotic, desperate gamble that human crews had learned to execute, while their Zephyrian opponents still struggled to comprehend how such tactics could possibly succeed against superior technology and overwhelming numerical advantages. Operation Final Storm began at exactly the same moment across thousands of light years, as human forces launched coordinated attacks on every known Zephyrian command facility in the galaxy. Admiral Kate Sullivan had spent months planning this impossible operation that would either liberate humanity or result in their complete extinction within a matter of hours. Jake Morrison led the assault on the Zephyrian homeworld aboard his flagship, surrounded by a fleet of captured alien vessels, crewed by humans who had learned to operate technology that responded to chaos rather than logic. The enemy capital was protected by defensive systems that had never been breached in thousands of years of collective expansion. But humans were about to test those defenses in ways no previous opponent had ever imagined. Captain Danny Foster commanded the attack on the primary Zephyrian manufacturing center, where the aliens produced their most advanced weapons and starships. His crews had practiced their assault using tactics that deliberately contradicted everything. They had learned about space combat while incorporating random elements that made their movements impossible to predict or counter. Commander Sarah Blake coordinated strikes against communication hubs that connected the collective consciousness across the galaxy. Her forces used captured Zephyrian equipment that had been modified by Maria Santos to introduce quantum resonance, cascades into alien networks whenever human operators embraced sufficient levels of tactical unpredictability during combat operations. The first phase of the operation succeeded beyond anyone's expectations, as human forces penetrated defensive perimeters that should have been impregnable. Zephyrian commanders found themselves unable to coordinate effective responses because their quantum consciousness links were being disrupted by the very presence of humans who refused to behave according to mathematical models. General Kethvar watched in growing panic as reports flooded in from across the galaxy, describing impossible human victories against overwhelming alien forces. The collective's perfect military machine was breaking down under the strain of fighting. Enemies who had weaponized randomness itself into something more dangerous than any conventional weapon. Dr. Lisa Park felt the change beginning as the Zephyrian mothership around her started experiencing system failures that spread like an infection through the vessel's quantum networks. The alien crew moved with increasing desperation as their shared consciousness began fragmenting under interference from human unpredictability that their technology could not filter or compensate for. Ambassador Veltar staggered into the detention area where Lisa was held and demanded to know what humans had done to the collective's sacred unity. The diplomat's usual composure had cracked, revealing something approaching terror as he felt his connection to the galactic consciousness wavering for the first time in his species' history. Lisa tried to explain that humans had not attacked the collective directly, but had simply been themselves in ways that exposed fundamental weaknesses in Zephyrian society. A civilization built on absolute predictability could not cope with opponents who thrived on chaos and uncertainty while maintaining emotional bonds that transcended logical analysis. Meanwhile, Jake Morrison fought his way through the Zephyrian homeworld's orbital defenses, using tactics that should have resulted in the complete destruction of his fleet. Instead, the quantum resonance from human unpredictability was causing alien weapons to malfunction in ways that actually helped the attacking forces by creating gaps in defensive coverage. The breakthrough came when Maria Santos discovered that prolonged exposure to human chaos was fundamentally altering Zephyrian technology at the quantum level. Alien systems were beginning to respond to human operators who embraced randomness, while rejecting their original programming that assumed rational, predictable behavior from all users. Captured Zephyrian weapons began accepting commands from human crews, who deliberately introduced random variables into their targeting procedures. Alien ships started responding to navigation inputs from pilots who made course corrections based on intuition rather than calculation. The technology that had once been exclusively Zephyrian was becoming something new that bridged the gap between order and chaos. General Kethvar made a desperate attempt to rally his forces by appearing on screens throughout the collective fleet, but his message was interrupted when human hackers used captured alien communication systems to broadcast contradictory orders that created confusion among Zephyrian units across multiple star systems simultaneously. The confusion spread through the quantum consciousness network like a virus as individual Zephyrians began experiencing thoughts and emotions that were not their own. The rigid mental discipline that had maintained collective unity for millennia started breaking down under the influence of human psychological patterns that valued individuality over conformity. Jake Morrison finally reached the Zephyrian command center, where Ambassador Veltar waited alone among banks of failing computers and flickering displays. The alien diplomat had aged visibly as his connection to the collective consciousness weakened, and he began experiencing individual awareness for the first time in his species' history. Veltar looked at Jake with eyes that now showed something approaching understanding, as he spoke the words that would echo through galactic history. He admitted that the collective had finally encountered something they could not assimilate or Destroy because humans represented a form of evolution that transcended their previous experience with intelligent life. The ambassador explained that other species had adapted to war by becoming more efficient or more brutal, but humans had done something unprecedented. They had learned to thrive on conflict itself while retaining their essential humanity through bonds that could not be broken by force or logic. War had not destroyed them, but had forged them into something the galaxy had never seen before. The remaining Zephyrian forces began surrendering as their quantum consciousness network collapsed under the weight of human unpredictability. Across the galaxy, 846 species that had been held in collective bondage for thousands of years suddenly found themselves free to think and act as individuals for the first time in their histories. Admiral Sullivan received reports of complete victory, but the celebration was muted by the recognition of what humanity had become during the Long War. The peaceful explorers who had first ventured into space were gone forever, replaced by something harder and more dangerous but also more resilient than their predecessors. The epilogue came months later when Jake Morrison stood before the United Species Assembly as the elected representative of the new Human Federation. Behind him flew a flag that bore symbols not of peace, but of the price that had been paid for freedom. The other species looked to humanity for guidance, but the humans who accepted that responsibility were no longer the same people who had once sought only peaceful coexistence. Jake's final words to the assembly carried the weight of everything humanity had endured and everything they had become. He spoke of the choice that had been forced upon them and the path they had walked through fire and loss to emerge as something new. They had not been born for war, but war had forged them into the guardians of galactic freedom. The galaxy was free because humans had learned to be more than human. They had learned to be unbreakable, and that knowledge would shape the future of every species that chose to remain free rather than submit to those who would rule over them.